Greetings. Welcome to Dr. English's Book Lovers Book Club. I'm Dr. English and I teach English. Today I'm going to review another kid's book, The Best Christmas Pageant Ever by Barbara Robinson. I read this really quickly just because I wanted to go back and read it. And I know it's like June, but who cares? It's a Christmas book, but it's hilarious. And I still laugh out loud when I read this book. It's just, and I think about my own family of having, 11 siblings. And I just think, I'm sure that people thought we were the Herdmans whenever we did anything because there are so many of us. I don't think we would, lit anything on fire or burn down anybody's tool shed. But I'm sure we did lots of other things that probably the people and the neighbors talked about all the time in a very small town. So whenever I read it, I can't help but think about, wonder what everyone's perception was about us when I was growing up, because there were so many of us. There were a couple of families in my hometown that we had 12 and another one had 9. And I just think, I wonder what people thought of us, because it's just like, I understand this whole sense of like, the kids are just running amok and, their parents have tried everything and it's like impossible because there's just too many to keep track of. I just love that it's like, told through, the mothers, the daughters or sons. I can't remember now. I can't recall, but to hear from the child's point of view, about the Christmas pageant is kind of funny because, it's like I'm watching all that's going on and my mother is a part of this, and it's like, oh my gosh, my mother's a part of this. I feel so bad, at the Second Presbyterian Church, because the person who usually does it broke her leg or something like that. It's like, this is like every mom's worst nightmare, that the head of the Christmas pageant would be injured before the Christmas pageant. And then the thought about maybe just canceling it kind of was not really, that wasn't going to happen either. So it's like funny that it's a very small town to think about. We've always done the Christmas pageant, and the Christmas pageant, must go on. The show must go on. And it's because the Herdmans have never been a part of it. The Herdmans don't know anything about the story of Jesus and Christmas, and they show up because one of the kids mentioned that there's food, and I just thought that is, I could see all of my family saying, "Oh, there's food. I think we should go. There's snacks," and so I love that so much because I can relate to, the orneriness of the kids, but the voice that Barbara Robinson has in here, where she's talking about the Herdmans and how awful they are, it's just absolutely slapstick funny. And I was reading it out loud to my husband because I have to read this out loud to you because I haven't read it in a while, and it's just so funny. And he's just grinning from ear to ear about her really great comedic timing in this little novelette. And I think, and I know this has been made into a movie. That Charlotte's Web, and I don't know, I can't remember if Jacob Have I Loved, well, it's the last 3 books I've done, has been made into a movie. I know Bridge to Terabithia is, but this one has been made into a movie. But I still don't think that the movie can do justice to it, to get her voice, in that. But it does a pretty good job, if I remember right. But there's so many little details that they're not always in a video of it. And so, but I would say of all the kids' books I've read, the other one is like Harriet the Spy is pretty funny too. And I think that's going to be my next book to review as I go back in my bookshelf and find some of the books for kids that I think are just classics. And it's just been a great deal of fun to go back and reread them and remember, how much joy they brought me, and they still do bring me. So, okay. So, I guess, there's nothing more I can say except that everybody should read this book, and it's just so much fun. It doesn't take very long. And so, go back and reread it if you haven't read it in a while. So I'm going to read a part where, the mother is like, worried about who's going to be cast, and, no one ever wants to volunteer to be Joseph. And so I'm picking up where the Reverend Hopkins always volunteers his son, who's like, ugh, like very many preachers' kids, like, I don't want to do that. So here's Reverend Hopkins. You're going to be Joseph. This is to his son Elmer. Reverend Hopkins says, that's it. I don't want to be Joseph, Elmer told him. I'm too big and I feel dumb up there. And all those little kids give me a pain in the neck. I can understand that, Reverend Hopkins said. I can even sympathize. But till somebody else volunteers for Joseph, you're stuck with it. Nobody's ever going to do that, Elmer said. I even offered Grady Baker 50 cents to be Joseph, and he wouldn't do it. I'm going to have to be Joseph for the rest of my life. Cheer up, Reverend Hopkins told him. Maybe somebody will turn up. I'll bet he didn't think that somebody would be Ralph Herdman. All right, Mother said. Ralph will be our Joseph. Now, does anyone else want to volunteer for Mary? Mother looked all around, trying to catch somebody's eyes. Anybody's eyes. Janet, Roberta. Alice, don't you want to volunteer this year? No, Alice said, so low you could hardly hear her. I don't want to. Nobody volunteered to be Wiseman either, except Leroy Claude and Ollie Herdman. So there was my mother, stuck with a Christmas pageant full of Herdmans in the main roles. There was one Herman left over and one main role left over, and you didn't have to be very smart to figure out that Gladys was going to be the angel of the Lord. What do I have to do? Gladys wanted to know. The angel of the Lord was the one who brought the good news to the shepherds, Mother said. Right away, all the shepherds began to wiggle around in their seats, figuring that any good news Gladys brought them would come with a smack in the teeth. Charlie's friend, Hubie Carmichael, raised his hand and said, I can't be a shepherd. We're going to Philadelphia. Why didn't you say so before? Mother asked. I forgot. Another kid said, my mother doesn't want me to be a shepherd. Why not? Mother said. I don't know. She just said, don't be a shepherd. One kid was honest. Gladys Herdman hits too hard, he said. Why, Gladys isn't going to hit anybody, Mother said. What an idea. The angel just visits the shepherds in the field and tells them Jesus is born. And hits them, said the kid. Of course, he was right. You could just picture Gladys whamming shepherds left and right, but Mother said that was perfectly ridiculous. I don't want to hear another word about it, she said. No shepherds may quit or get sick, she added, before the kid in the front pew could ask. Well, everybody was leaving. Mother grabbed Alice Wendelkin by the arm and said, Alice, why in the world did you raise your hand to be Mary? I don't know, Alice said, looking mad. But I knew. I'd heard Imogene Herman telling Alice what would happen to her if she dared to volunteer. All the ordinary, everyday Herdman things, like clonking you on the head and drawing pictures all over your homework papers and putting worms in your coat pocket. I don't care, Alice told her. I don't care what you do. I'm always Mary in the pageant. And next spring, Imogene went on, squinching up her eyes, when the pussy willows come out, I'll stick a pussy willow so far down your ear that nobody can reach it. And it'll sprout there, and it'll grow and grow, and you'll spend the rest of your life with a pussy willow bush growing out your ear. You had to admire her. That was the worst thing any of them ever thought up to do. Of course, some people might not think that could happen, but it could. Ollie Herdman did it once. He got this terrible earache in school, and when the nurse looked down his ear with her little lighted tube, she yelled so loud you could hear her all the way down the hall. He's got something growing down there, she hollered. They had to take Ollie to the hospital and put him under and get the sprouted pussy willow out of his ear. So that was why Alice kept her mouth shut about being married. You know, she wouldn't do all those things she said, I told Alice as we walked home. Yes, she would, Alice said. Hermans will do anything. But your mother should have told them no. Somebody should put Imogene out of the pageant and all the rest of them too. They'll do something terrible and ruin the whole thing. So that's just one of the many little tidbits of the best Christmas pageant ever. This is a book I would probably, I love to read out loud. So I would probably read this to like second and third graders because all the Herdmans are, they're still pretty young yet. And I think second and third graders would just think this book is hilarious. They would just be in awe of the characters. And I mean in a good way, they would just be, because in the end, it just ends up being the best Christmas pageant ever, even though they all think it's going to be the worst Christmas pageant ever, with the dreadful Herdmans in the roles of Mary and Joseph and the shepherd and the wise men and the angel of the Lord. And then there's a scene in there too where Imogene brings their family the ham from it's like the ham from the people that the church that go out and give food to families, and brings the ham, which from my perspective is like the most generous thing someone in her situation could have done, is brought that ham. I totally got that. It's classic. So if you could actually read this aloud to like probably second to fifth grade. The fifth graders would get a kick out of the older Herdmans. The second graders would get a kick out of Gladys. But definitely you could do this with like fourth and fifth grade if you did book clubs with fifth graders or fourth graders. It would be a great one for them to like read together in small groups and talk about it. There'd be some lively discussion about what's going on, and even just some of the literary devices of how especially with voice and the plot are really well done by Barbara Robinson. And so, yeah, I would definitely and keep it on your shelf. I would keep it on my shelf even if I was teaching high school because sometimes you just need a little bit of a fun, quick read at Christmas time, even for high school students. So, and if I was talking to my pre-service teachers, I would definitely tell my middle school pre-service and to do this with fifth and sixth grade in particular, because I think that it's an older book. I'm not too sure that kids nowadays even are aware of it, and that's sad to know that. So I highly recommend that you read it as an adult, whatever, but kids would really enjoy the book because it's still really hilarious, and it just makes me laugh out loud still. So thank you for joining me. I'll see you next time. Bye.